Welcome to Universal Journey Talk, spreading positive energy. Hey everybody, good to be back. Whatever, it's been about 2 weeks, whatever and stuff. We're all back together, but we are talking about martial arts and whatever. So we just wanted to talk about that here. Martial arts. Is there spirituality? Is it all violence? Whatever. So we're just going to kind of get into it. We've got the brothers once again, all of us. We've got Eric, the allegorist. We've got my brother Heath and my other brother Ian. So now, the reason why I wanted to have all of us again in this is because, I like that, is because over time we've been talking about MMA. We're all into MMA, mixed martial arts. And, there's still a stigma that comes with it, which is like, oh, it's all violent and blah, blah, blah. It's all, primal and it's all just violence and this and that. But is there, which we, have realized over time, is there a spiritual side to it? Is there a way of humbling, a way of learning order and things like that? For instance, most people are probably at this point aware of the podcast of Joe Rogan. So he's one of the commentators for the UFC, and he knows what he's talking about. Now, granted, he may have not necessarily competed as much in these, competitions, but he actually did a lot of training and all this other stuff. So way back when the UFC started. Anyway, one of the comments that he made is that when he was growing up as a younger guy, he had like a troubled life and things like that. So he was, frustrated with things, blah, blah, blah. Was quick to get into fights and stuff like that and stuff. But he went to, and then he started to learn martial arts and for, self-defense and things like that. But the thing is that it actually, from what he was saying, is it helped to humble him, helped him to actually learn order. It helped him to realize his place, which is a problem that I think we see a lot in this new generation that we have now, where everyone has a voice, on whatever social media, blah blah blah. They think that everything that they say matters. People give it a bunch of likes, and then the next thing you know, they're like, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah," and it's like, in other words, it's almost kind of I feel like we're coming where we are in this new generation of entitled people that are really not that humble, and it's almost like when you get into MMA or you get into martial arts and you actually realize, real what actually works and what doesn't work. It changes your whole perspective, not just from a physical perspective, but also a mental perspective and maybe even also a spiritual perspective. When we even think of Shaolin monks and all these other things. So we're going to kind of like delve into this, from many perspectives. I may play a little bit of devil's advocate because there's some things that I think could be harmful. But mainly, the reason why I wanted to point this out is because once again, we're all of us brothers, we all watch UFC, MMA.
Man.
What's that? Oh, okay. By the way, I'm going to be doing a little bit of pausing here because I've got my one brother, Ian. He's actually working right now. So he'll be pausing every so often while he's talking about while we're talking. But I did want to say, so my brother Ian actually was the first one that actually got into MMA. He's been training in Brazil. He's actually done actual competition, throughout the years. And even currently right now, I think he's actually rebuilding his own, competition MMA thing where he's working. But while he's doing his thing right now, I want to talk about Eric. Eric has basically been a little bit of Ian's protege. Okay, I think Ian's back with us. But so Ian, over the years, has been doing a little bit of training with all the brothers. I've done like the minimal amount. I have done some training, but minimal. Not even talking about it. Ian has done the most, as I just mentioned. And Ian, I was just talking about all your credentials while you were talking to other people. But
that'd be cool. I think there's one pepperoni. There's some pepperoni in this plane. I'll take a pepperoni. Right.
So besides Ian,
sorry guys.
Yeah, no problem, dude. So besides Ian, now we've got Eric. Eric has also actually competed. He has, been practicing and all this other stuff too. And then we have, Heath too, who has been practicing with them, on, off, and about the whole time. So I'm not sure if Ian has a moment, but I kind of just wanted to start off with Ian because he has really like the most experience and all this stuff. He's still building a new thing in MMA or whatever it is at the place where he's working now. Anyway, so Ian, just overall, where you're working now, and what you're trying to do with starting up, a little bit of MMA discipline. What's your motivation, in that?
Well, that was a great intro, Kirk, and actually you hit on a lot of the things. I think what we're endeavoring to do is by looking to, and having the conversation about mixed, martial arts, not just mixed martial arts, but any martial arts really in general. What type of effect does it have on the person studying that particular martial art, or various ones? And so, in my experience with martial arts, I'm sure it's different in some ways for some, but ultimately the same for everyone, is we're talking about revealing truth, really. So when we're talking about, what I'm doing here is trying to do something. I work at a mission in Asbury Park, and we deal with recovery, people in recovery, and all sorts of things like that. And so one of the things that helps people, as we know through working out, people are just starting to find out that the helping people who are undergoing different types of addictions or detoxes, that to physically do things to manifest and strengthen their body can have direct effects on how they're going to handle and ultimately overcome, in a physical sense and a mental sense, the thing that is holding them by, that they're addicted to. The working out the body and taking a healthy road in some sort of way can help somebody to overcome these things. Now, martial arts kind of addresses the major areas of these things, not only physical, but also the mental and even the spiritual side. So the organization that I work with is a Christian organization, and so we're trying to endeavor to kind of meld this program where we have a martial arts. Now I'm trained and learned from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under really, really great teachers, David Adib, who everybody knows, and another person, his teacher in Royler Gracie. So, and I'll expand more on this in a little bit. Hang on.
Okay. All right, cool. So, thank you. Anyway, so let's move on a little bit to Eric now. So, Eric is once again a little bit of the byproduct of basically when Ian started, muscles and all. So he actually, once again, did compete, whatever. But I think even for you, it was interesting watching you in your fights to see, or in your training as well, to see where you excelled and also where you did not excel. So I'm curious, once again, kind of what you learned from that, and just your overall feeling on MMA, because I think you've kind of been doing a little bit of still practicing and training to maybe do some more MMA. So Eric, take it.
All right. First of all, yeah. Even now I train basically every day to a sense. You know what I mean? It's like part of my meditation. You know what I mean? So, and it does, like Ian was saying, like a lot of things. No matter, like to me, just training, getting your body physically in movement creates flow, and that's something similar that like Ian can relate. Like Bruce Lee was talking about water, and you know, there's a flow. Like anything, you know, when you get dialed into something, you get into that flow, and then you know what I mean, where you're dialed in and things are just running on all cylinders. That's how a lot of times happens in a fight, where you just get into that flow and you're just, you know, you're just on. And but so I practice every day, practically. You know what I mean? That's like part of my meditation. But I noticed like when I lost my fight in the cage, that like how it bothered me, like how I knew I could have really trained harder and fight my fight. And sometimes a fight symbolically represents a lot of things that you're going through. Even on the spiritual side, like I look at it like when I'm shadow boxing. I shadow box a lot. Hey, to me, it's like in a spiritual sense, like defeating and ridding yourself of subconscious blockages. You know what I mean, or negative blockages, things that get into your mind. You know, like when you're trying to meditate and all those thoughts that clutter. It's a lot of times meditation. It's like literally beating up the negative blockages and things in a sense, and a lot of times it works, you know what I mean? But I noticed like when I lost my fight, it hit me like I knew I didn't fight my fight, and it humbled me, and that's what like it was a rebirth, and you learn from your loss, and I'll tell you like I'm so happy for that, so much gratitude, because it really like it knocked something loose in me that made me just understand the philosophy of just the mechanics beyond just fighting, you know, just understand like this Fibonacci spiral, you know, and everything how things make more sense, and there's a fluent flow and everything, you know what I mean? And the more you're dialed in, you'll see the grace behind it. And I really have to say, it's really astonishing how it hit me. Like when you're shadow boxing or you're learning any type of fighting or martial art, there's a lot of breathing. And when you get dialed in, you have to think you're using your left side and your right side hemisphere. So now it's like the more like if you're right-handed and you start writing and using a lot of your left hand or your left side of your brain, that makes you more you expand and become more gifted in many ways, just like hitting different parts of your brain. So you'll notice, like I noticed even like the other day with Heath, yesterday we were at the park throwing a football, and even Heath, you notice my arm just got more, it was on more, it seemed stronger. My mechanics of throwing the ball, and all these things, believe it or not, it has to do with the mechanics of actually all that training that I've been doing, literally with like just shadow boxing and understanding little things that are really to your willpower. You notice from fighting and things that beyond the fight, you know what I mean? Remember, like it's still competitive, and a lot of times to have a challenge, to compete in something, it makes you stronger will. And you can use that in many aspects of your life. It doesn't just have to do with fighting, but fighting could be a way of grounding you. You know what I mean? And then you could be a better businessman or a better husband or a wife or whatever because of these things. And put in the discipline and the amount of time and practice. You know what I mean? That means something. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely movement is something that really is. It ties into being to your consciousness in many ways, you know, instead of just being stagnant.
Right.
You feel there's that flow, that spiral within yourself that you're activated, you know, and that's why a lot of times you feel like you got to compete in something. Whether it's, I'm not saying it has to be fighting or in a cage, but rather in any type of sport. You know what I mean? Tennis, football, baseball. Why do we humans do these things? You know, a lot of times beyond the competition, there is a spiritual side, and like you said, being
challenge
humbling
or whatever, right?
Or discipline, challenges, and how to overcome obstacles.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And I totally get exactly where you're coming from. So Heath and me, we haven't actually, actually competed, but Heath has done a lot of training with both Eric and Ian. I haven't done as much. I've done a little on my own. But so anyway, Heath. So now let me just ask you, being more like the middleman, um, from what you've kind of like experienced in training and things like that, like, do you do it more for, in other words, for a spiritual thing, kind of more like, sometimes, in the way that Eric mentions it, or are you doing more for like, hey man, look, I gotta be able to, defend myself, or do you do it more for the sport? Like, what's your feeling on it?
A little bit, not way too much for the spiritual aspect. No, I just do it more just for the, be a better fighter. It's exercise as well, keeps you in shape, and it's discipline, Maybe might keep you a little bit more humble. Yeah, the more this, makes you a better fighter, So it's always good, especially for security. Like just to walk down the street knowing that someone, picks a fight with you, you can hold your own, But basically, but not for a spiritual side. Not for me. Just like fighters, not every fighter goes in for the spiritual side. Some fighters just want to fight, Some fighters just do it for the money. Rampage said, the minute I heard, guys can fight and make money, I'm in, So, so there's different levels, or not different levels, but different, reasons why people do stuff. But me, it's mainly just for the discipline and for the exercise, and that's pretty much it, in a nutshell, pretty much.
And you know what? I think that that's fine, because you know what? We do live in a world where, you can't dismiss the what I consider to be like the primal side, which is that, or the basic instinct of survival, which is that, there are people out there that have bad intentions, and you need to know how to self-defend yourself. That's why I do appreciate there's a school that's like right across the street from me, whatever and stuff. And all they just teach self defense. You see those little kids in there, and they're doing their thing. It's mostly little kids the whole time. I guess it's more for little kids, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I think that's one of the best things that they can learn, because it teaches you from a very, very young age how to react properly, in my opinion, to scenarios, rather than like, because once again, I'm going back to what I was saying. Like, we're kind of in this like society where it's like, I'm gonna complain about things and have other people take care of my but boom, this is bad, and so the government needs to change this and stuff. And I'm like, okay, granted, certain things the government should do, but then there's other things where it's like, you got to take care of that on your own. Meaning, like, you need to, when there are individual things that happens in our life, and if you're someone that just like phrase back and goes, someone needs to do something about that. And I'm almost like, hey, you know what? If you stand up and you have a moral background, meaning, it kind of was built up because you had to fight through it, then you start to realize it builds your character. On a level, not just physically, but also mentally, where you're able to challenge things directly rather than, like scoot around and whatever and stuff. So, once again, I think that there's a mental side to it, which is good. There's also a spiritual side to it, and, whatever. So anyway, so now I wanted to go back to, I think, Ian, did you get cut off a little bit? I'm not sure if you did.
Add on to what you're saying, ultimately where it comes in, people get out of it kind of what they put into it. And it's also, too, everybody comes into martial arts or gets its benefits for different reasons. A lot of people actually, and you're right, Kirk, many of the things you said, I won't say most, but I'll say a lot of people get into martial arts because of some sort of trauma that they need an answer to. Martial arts can provide that. Like, say, for instance, maybe you were bullied, or there's some kid that, early on that's picking on you, or maybe you're a woman and you feel scared because of some person you're in a relationship that there's all different various reasons that are threatening. in this world. And reality is threats are everywhere. That's just the truth. And many people, if you had a perfect background, childhood growing up or teenagehood or whatever, never ran into any confrontation, you're quite the lucky person. And, that's great, but that's just not reality. Most people are going to be involved in some sort of situation in something. So they usually start off where martial arts is just a way to protect themselves, almost like a weapon. But what happens is, as you get on into martial arts and into training of it, and especially if it's something that has an air of realism to it, or a training that is something that is in a very practical way, something that's prevalent in most people's lives, you're going to actually find out more about yourself, and then you reveal yourself. It's just like anything. You have to put yourself in certain scenarios and to find out what you're afraid of, what you like, what you don't like, how to better, how to not get hurt in a confrontation in a situation, how to handle it. So that's where the confidence comes in. Now, if you go even deeper, then you start to get to the spiritual side, where to me, martial arts is something where it reveals the truth. It's to me the only thing that's that exists where a human being can test religion, what they believe. One philosophy can literally be tested against another.
Yeah.
Because that's why most martial arts are the way of this, the way of that, the way of this guy, the way of whatever, because that's someone's philosophy that they put their whole belief into, and they wholeheartedly believe it. So the evolution of MMA and its big draw is that you have now an arena where people can literally test their belief system,
right,
and find out what is true and what is not true. And ultimately, how many times do we hear that? A guy goes, well, I believe in my art, and I've already visualized the fight. So all I have to do is go in there and execute it, and I know it's going to happen. And to their dismay, at the end of the fight, the other guys get his arms raised. And now he has to go back and reevaluate what he actually was putting all his faith in for the first time, maybe.
Yeah.
To actually find out that everything that you believe actually isn't true.
Right.
So that has to be tested, because the other guy, he believes everything is true too.
Right.
And ultimately, only one guy's winning.
Can I just throw I like what you were saying. Can I just see what Heath was going to say about that? Heath?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm done.
You mentioned the belief system, and I'm serious too, because you're right. Sometimes people put their whole life in like something they believe, especially in fighting, and then when they face a opponent who believes in something different, and the thing is though, they realize all that training, sometimes that belief system only lasts like 10 to 15 seconds in the ring against somebody. That's how fast it changes. And then they wake up and realize, like, all that time I put in, and this guy took me out in 15 seconds, like the Gracies. They submit people left and right and finish them so fast, and then you realize, like that is the beauty about MMA, and I agree with Ian in that sense. Like,
right.
Sometimes you train, and you're always going to think, win or lose, I'll tell you now, this will not be no quick match. And then you realize the fight's only 5, 10, 15 seconds.
All right, so if I can just add into that. So I think we're actually hitting on a very pivotal point, which a lot of people probably need to really, like what I think we're honing on in here is, we're talking about absolute truth. When UFC first started, I still think till this day, it is the most sobering and informative entertainment. You want to call it? I mean, it is entertainment, but it's still real. Because I used to watch stuff like whatever. Who's the guy that did Aikido? The Aikido movies.
Steven Seagal.
Yeah, Steven Seagal and stuff, whatever. And you had all these other movies. You had the other guy, I don't know, whatever. And like, oh, people like, yo, man, that guy would kick ass and all this other stuff. All right, we've seen people when UFC first started that were like a karate master or a whatever master, a Aikido master or whatever, all these masters and shit. And they got killed whatever and stuff. Mostly by the Gracies, by the way, whatever, because jiu-jitsu really shut a lot of people down. But anyway, the bottom line is there were still some really powerful people that did some amazing things, whatever. And basically, it put the end generally to the controversy of what really works and what really doesn't. You know what I mean? Like the stuff that's all showy, wah, 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 compared to the stuff that really works. And that's why I love UFC till this day. Because other people go, like, hey man, whatever, blah, 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 and they talk all this stuff. We've got now an archive from the first one till UFC 262 or whatever we are now, whatever and stuff, of what works and what doesn't. John Jones being probably one of the all-time best, as screwed up as his life is and stuff, whatever and stuff, that goes to show you, like, if you...
Judge.
What's that?
Don't judge.
Yeah. Well, whatever. I mean, hey, look, there's many different things. But anyway, so I'm just saying is that UFC, to me, once again, it shows realism. Realism. And so actually to go along that, I wanted to ask a question to you guys. So now I'm going to just kind of go a little bit off into a side thing here. So, Bruce Lee, we all know one of the top, all-time MMA or martial arts, whatever and stuff.
Pioneers of mixed martial arts.
Pioneer, totally. Now, there's a lot of things we don't know about him. We've kind of talked about this stuff personally, and I wanted to just kind of bring this to the forefront. Here's my only thing. Okay, by the way, all props to Bruce Lee. I think he was a pioneer completely. But here's my question. I wonder now if what he knew back then would be that good in MMA now. Now, I want to preface it with what he knew back then probably may have been the best that there was at that time. But in other words, it's almost kind of like, I would like to see what Bruce Lee could do now, or, maybe he wouldn't have done as good. Meaning this, because the only problem I've always had, people talk, like Bruce Lee was the best of all time. I'm like, yeah, but everything you saw was in a freaking movie, man. I mean, I wanted to see his actual fighting. Now, granted, if anyone want to talk about it, if you've actually seen him fight in real life, when it wasn't in a movie or whatever, then I'm going, okay, now that tells me something. Anything, same thing with Aikido guy or whatever stuff. If you show me stuff you can do in a movie, yeah, of course you're going to win. You know what I mean? Whatever. So what I'm saying is how much of Bruce Lee was actually like the real deal, and that I can go, compared to which is like, man, most of this stuff was just in the movies. So what do you guys think, Eric?
I'll just say it, like, Bruce Lee, if you know the story, I mean, he's been in a lot of real fights. Now, just because they weren't recorded doesn't mean it didn't happen or exist. Because if I get into a fight if I get in a fight tomorrow on the street and no one was there to witness it, just like a tree, if it fell down in the forest, no one's there to hear it. Did it ever make a sound? But all I'm gonna say is I did get into the fight because it's personal. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And there's been witnesses anyway. So, but beyond whether we record Bruce Lee fighting or not, his philosophy, when you listen to him, regardless of watching him on in movies or TV, which either way, I'm saying this isn't to knock every movie star that is a mixed martial arts, like Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal is a very talented mixed martial arts person. And remember, there is a reason why he was on TV. It isn't like the guy, he sucks. Like, no, like he can whip some ass. Like, my thing is, who are we comparing him to? I mean, Steven Seagal, he lost when he got into like a gentleman's match with his own stuntmen, the Machados, which are like, Gracie's related to them and their family, whatever. But you're talking, that was the Machado brothers, you know what I mean? So my thing is, I don't want to knock anybody that trains real hard. And just
Eric, in that incident though, do you know what happened? I mean, it wasn't the Machados that humbled him. He ended up going to learn from the Machados because Steven Seagal apparently learned all this about martial arts, but the one thing did escape him: humility. Because there was a bunch of people during the Under Siege when they were doing it, and one of the stunt coordinators was old man Fabio, Gurgel, not Gurgel, I'm sorry, Judo Gene LaBelle. And he was an old man at this time, and they were like, they were all saying, Judo Gene LaBelle will take you down and choke you out. And Steven Seagal said, nobody's taking me down and choking him out. So then he went at it with Judo Gene LaBelle, and at, I don't know, the ripe old age of 60-something, here he is choking out Steven Seagal. And after that moment, he learned, you know what? Everything I believed isn't exactly so true. So then he started to, but he was humble enough to say, you know what? I was wrong, and now I am going to learn from the people who know what you know. And now you movies, you see him doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in half of them, you know, or most of them. So
Steven Seagal, though, the one thing you have to admit, though, because you said that, all right, maybe Judo Gene LaBelle, whatever his name, beat him. But I do know for a fact who Steven Seagal did beat, and nobody talks about it. Another famous person. What was the girl in Weird Science?
That he beat a girl?
LeBrock? Kelly LeBrock?
He beat his wife and proved that. He said, go again.
You got me, man. Yo, you got me.
I'm for Steven Seagal. There is somebody he can beat. He went undefeated, I think, against him.
Hey, so by the way, what do you guys think about Van Damme? Do you think he was like a real deal, or I think it was commercial to me? What do you guys think?
All of these guys, most of these movie stars have a background. And just like before, I didn't finish
Dolph Lundgren was a real kickboxing champion.
Yeah, he's a real
a very good kickboxer. That's a fact.
Hey. But I'm saying, even going back to Bruce Lee before we get him off, Bruce Lee got into a lot of fights. He didn't win them all. That's how he learned to get better. He kept, every time he lost, he'd get better and always work on. That's what I'm saying. So, like, you got fighters that, or a person who believes in one art, he could take on another person and lose. But that doesn't mean his belief necessarily doesn't work. Because then he'll go back to the drawing board and then can have a rematch and beat the person. When it shows you he overcame his loss. He overcame that weakness. You know what I mean? So it depends how you look at it. And like with martial arts and just the world, fighting in an arena or in a cage is basically no different than the planet you're on. The planet's just a giant battleground. You know what I mean? It's a stage. It's an arena. There's so much going on. So you can look at it rather as fighting and competing, but in any way, you're still competing against yourself. Even though you think you're taking on your opponent, but why do you do it all? Yeah, we do it for competition and to test your skill. You know what I mean? Your physical, your gifts, your God-given gifts, and how you enhance that with your skills and knowledge. You know what I mean? But then it goes to the spiritual side, and it goes to the physical side, and it goes to your own ego. A lot of it, you'll know, does feed to your ego, and it's how you want to look at it. But sometimes, even like fighting is a good way to purge. A lot of times when you fight or whatever, it is like it's almost like you're feeding your ego what it needs without being destructive, in a sense. You know what I mean?
No, right. A lot of what Mr. Miyagi said, remember when Daniel San said, well, that's not what they're learning at this karate school. I.e. right here, Cobra Kai, baby.
Cobra Kai.
Greatest karate school that ever lived. No retreat, no surrender. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Yeah, that's right. But he was right. He said, well, that's unfair. And he was and Miyagi said, yeah, I can tell. The students there weren't learning humility. They were learning to punish. They were learning he was feeding the ego and feeding all this. There was no humility about it or about learning about themselves. It was just used as a tool for destruction. And there are those people, yes, it exists. Not everybody uses what martial arts can give you, and they take all those components and use it to better themselves. And that's what basically martial arts will do, is in some way better
empower you.
Yourself. That you can be more compassionate to humans, because you have something about you now that is beyond, that is better, and knowing your own weaknesses. With them, they weren't interested in that, So a lot of people do get into a lot of things for different reasons, but ultimately, when that person who isn't humble gets humbled, it's very hard for them to stay that way. It's very hard for them to stay that way in that environment because the truth ultimately reveals itself. And that if you think that you have nothing else to learn, that you know everything, you find out the hard way that actually you've limited yourself to learning anything.
Right.
Your pride is the actual stumbling block.
Right.
Because there's always someone bigger, someone who studied before you, someone who knows the art in the very essence of it, or there's always that person. So that's the humbling and yet bettering of martial arts, particularly jiu-jitsu, in itself.
I remember when someone asked Tito after his fight, he was like, "Are you the best? Are you the best?" At the time, what was he? He was a light heavyweight back then.
Yeah, I think so.
And either way, he goes, "So how does it be? Are you the best light heavyweight champion in the world?" And he goes, "I'm a fighter in the world. You know what I mean? And then make fighter in the world." Goes, well, no. There's always somebody out there bigger and better. You know what I mean? And that basically. Yeah.
So, a little side note to that. By the way, did you guys hear? This is official that Miesha Tate is coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard she might. I heard.
Oh, it's official. She's.
Sure has a set. Sure
I
has a
told you. Remember I told you guys that before?
All right. Well, hey, just because I'm trying to rotate everyone, Heath, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah. I believe Sure has a fight already set. Like she's already I think there's a scheduled date where she's already gonna fight.
Yeah.
So, but I mean it's cool. Like I don't know how good she'll do, but I mean she's always gonna be a good fighter, I'm sure. But I don't know if she's gonna be beating the top dogs now these days. But
Yeah.
it's great. But then again, who am I? Maybe she knows more now. Maybe she had a wake up call. Be like, you know what? From watching people, I'm gonna be better now than even before. You know what I'm saying? So you never even know.
I'll say this. I believe she's like 32, 33 or something, which is actually, that's prime fighting if you are really in the right mindset and now you've got the experience, you've got, all the other things. So it's almost like I don't know what her motivation is, but I will say this. Clearly, she's been a champion in the UFC and also Elite. So she has the ability. I'm almost like I don't know why she's doing it, but I will say, I'm almost kind of like, hey man, go for it. Like, why not? You know what I mean?
Of course. Why does people always say? Because it's like as a fighter, usually you start out hungry, then you get a little civilized. But then either way, when you want to come back or you retire, it's good to have that hunger again. It's like my step back. That's what keeps you youthful. Get hungry.
Right.
Sometimes if you're just going to be stagnant, then that's when that's when you get old. But if you can get that youthfulness and you want to still compete or do something and test your skills out again and be young and vibrant and go ahead, like more power too. That's what I'm talking about.
Maybe she don't want to be a wife. Maybe she's like, hey, baby, I want to do something.
I would love to fight right now in a cage. So Conor McGregor or Justin Poirier, just so you know, I'm ready if you guys want. And need a couple million. I don't
need to train first. We need to train. Be humble. Remember what Khabib says. Be humble.
Oh no, I'm humble.
There's many examples of that too. As dominant as Khabib is and things like that, I promise you, he didn't just one day pick up Sambo on the first day. He's unbeatable and will never lose a fight. He's lost thousands of times in the hills of Dagestan with his glory, his amazing history, legendary father in Abdominac. So he was led into it very early. But if you look at him now, he's the greatest fighter, is the most humble. You know what I mean? And that's every single fighter in UFC talks about that. What how he carries himself. His humility, his respect toward his opponents and whatnot, withstanding Conor because of some of the ways he acted. But even then, he was kind of bullied for like 4 months,
Yeah.
for him to erupt, and he's
That
still
was
a human
tough.
being. But just the same, he apologized afterwards and everything, and believe me, we all understood. And so and listen, and so ultimately, it's guys like that in order to get to that level, it's the humility and knowing the truth about who they are. That's where martial arts. That's where martial arts in general can bring someone. It can reveal things about you that you never knew. You thought you knew what fear was, or you didn't think that you could be afraid, and you find out what that is. When you're pinned and under somebody and you can't get up, or you're in what tools you thought were effective are rendered useless. These are the things that cause and help me here, Eric, an awakening.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right,
like,
so
like you said, you notice all the good fighters, all the really good fighters. You notice they have all those aspects: mind, body, and soul. They do have like the Khabibs, St. Pierre's. They have a spiritual side.
Yeah,
Not taking anything from the guys that don't. I want to say one thing also. A lot of fighters that maybe come in and don't have a spiritual side, a lot of times there's a bigger perspective. They just don't see it. They only see why they're doing it. But then they'll see later the reasons, and there's reasons why they did it. It was all spiritual. It's all spiritual. Everything's spiritual.
You know what, Eric? That is such a wise thing for you to say, and I'm really happy to hear you say that, because it is true. I was just watching a thing on Gordon Ryan. Ryan is an incredible grappler. He's arguably the best grappler in the world right now, and arguably the best grappler ever. And he's an American, under John Danaher, and who was one of Renzo Gracie's teachers. And he was talking about like a lot of the black belts and things like that. He's like your top level Abu Dhabi Combat Club champions, which is like the greatest grappling tournament in the world. He's like, a lot of those, your top black belts, he's like, they're horrible teachers. They can't teach anybody. He's like, they can't, they, even though they have all the strength and skill and, all this kind of thing, they can't teach people very much or very well, because they know what they can do and then whatever, but they don't use their mind isn't in a certain way that helps to help others develop themselves. That's a skill of its own, and that's a mastery and an awakening of its own. Yeah, so that's a really good point.
So if I could just jump in, I'm gonna get a little personal, but I don't want to put you on the spot too much. So Ian, I want to go into a little bit. Once again, you've got the most experience with MMA and martial arts and everything. So here's something that I think it bothered me back in the day, and now I'm curious to what your perspective is on it, looking back on it. And I'm not judging at all. I remember when you were first, getting into all MMA and you got really good with it. You're going to Brazil, you're doing all this other stuff. So you were with your roommates and blah, blah, blah. And your guys, one of your guys kind of like, general things is like, hey, look, if we're having a party and someone gets out of line or something, blah, 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 just put them in a chokehold and boom, 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 whatever, take them down, whatever and stuff. Don't worry about it. Now, listen, hold up. Once again, I'm just saying it was a different time, a different age, and whatever. Do you feel, looking back on that might have been a little abusive of your power? Or do you think you were like, hey, man, look, it is what it is. That's how you handle things. Like, in other words, I'm kind of curious to how people, change their, or where you look at the way you were then compared to the way you are now with it. You know what I mean?
The answer to that, too. All right, now, first I'm going to explain that. You're talking back then.
Right.
You're talking like the Royce Gracie era, like when Royce Gracie first came into this country,
right.
We were all figuring out. You're talking about the very first, we were some of the first students that, even in America, really, that were learning jiu-jitsu at that time. This is over 20 years ago.
Right.
And, so we at this time had seen Royce Gracie go in and into the UFC, this little guy, and beat these monsters one after another in the same tournament. Here we were, these guys that were just learning these brand new techniques, we were at this time, we're so pumped up to try them on anybody after
know.
watching Gracie's in action, which is them fighting people that confronted them in the street, and we
Right.
challenged them because of the Gracie challenge that they had. So being early on students of their art or whatever, you better believe we were a little bit over motivated, and I'll expand on that a little bit more in 1 second.
Okay. I did Project Adventure. I opted out of gym, and I did Project Adventure in high school, which was awesome. It's like, okay, go up 3 stories on a tree and jump from that tree to the other thing or something, whatever and stuff. But anyway, so it actually, like before that, like I was like afraid to go on roller coasters that had loops. I wouldn't go on. I was afraid. But after I did Project Adventure, holy crap, man, I could do anything. Even till this day, like I'm not nearly as afraid of anything because of all the stuff they made you have to face your fears.
Project Adventure, I also did Project Adventure as well, just to let you know as well.
Oh, okay.
And Project Adventure was good because you're right about that stuff, you know. But yeah, so in a whole, yeah, it definitely does, you know. That's really about it, you know. Me and Eric are always looking for ideas. Or if Eric comes up with an idea, I feed off his idea, then we come up with even a better idea.
Yeah, Ian, we got to show you some stuff. We got to start working on some new shows.
That's something, you know, we still even go on thinking, you know. Yeah, so yeah, definitely always.
And you hear that right there, Kirk? That's another big part of it right there. That people don't. You know, Bruce Lee even mentioned that a lot in when he ended up having to close his 4 schools down, kind of, you know, in a sense, unburdening himself with trying to prove that his formation of Jeet Kune Do had relevance, but also he was getting into the movie industry and whatnot, and not having the time to be able to share, you know, with people was the one thing that kind of he really didn't like about, you know, his life when he started getting in heavily duty, into movies. He had time for his own training, but he didn't have time for the sharing. So when I get together with Eric has an excellent mind. He too, and and creativity of coming up with moves. Because jiu-jitsu, and as we're finding now, we're in a new world where anybody that's into jiu-jitsu or mixed martial arts in general, is pretty much every 6 to 8 months there's like new stuff that comes out all the time. Kind of like the physical fitness world, there's new equipment and there's new ways of doing things and ways to activating your muscles and your body and pushing it in different ways. Well, there's new things that come out, especially with jiu-jitsu, which is like human chess, all the time. And Eric has been, and he's been in, around mixed martial arts and whatnot for so long that, the creativity of their minds, is just effective as any other person that is starting up a martial art or adding to or refining a martial art. So a lot of the things that Eric comes up with when we share ideas or whatnot, he'll come up with something that I've never even seen before, but because I know the concept, I can even expand on it. And then together we can refine it, and it becomes this tool that is something that might be our own, but that is super effective and super usable. Eric has shown me things that there are different ways of doing old techniques, and I've actually used them already. You know what I mean? To submit other people, I have a one-arm rear naked choke. Eric has a very straight, and I know it's from Eric, but he uses it as well, a very straight guillotine that maybe one day we'll have to do something where we show you on people on your show how it's done or whatnot, but it's one of a kind the way that he does it. It's from the elbow. I mean, it's hard. I can't even. But there's different techniques and different things that are, and that's the real. When you start to get to that level, that's where you're taking the chains off of limitation, and that's where martial arts can bring you when you're at that level. Is that you see how diverse and that's a very humbling and a very empowering and secure feeling, is when you can start to create at that level. Martial arts opens your mind. It's an opening of your mind and an opening of your imagination to create things that have practical use and work in unarmed combat. It's really
Expanding your consciousness.
yeah. So yes, it is true. Like Eric said, maybe none of us have ever seen a live competitive match with Bruce Lee or whatever, but it's not. We are not without any references to how good his technique was. When you have your Chuck Norris's, who was an undefeated Ed Parker's Invitational Karate champion for 6 years, never lost. And when he tells you that he can't put a finger on Bruce Lee, well, you kind of have an idea now where his level is. And then also from the word of mouth from other martial artists, that the very nature of Bruce Lee, the thing that and the reason why it also makes sense why he was elevating himself maybe higher than a lot of other martial artists is because he's referred to as the first mixed martial artist. Because by the time Game of Death came around and he was in a tracksuit, the reason why he was wearing that was symbolizing that he had abolished that having a rehearsed routine or that styles, that there are no styles. It's just how good you are of a fighter to maximize the knowledge that you have with the body that you have and to do the techniques as good as you can be. And that in itself is a martial art. Mixed martial arts now is the culmination of that philosophy, which is now we can't say, oh, well, this guy going to UFC, he's a kickboxer, or they used to be identified as a karate man or a taekwondo dude or a wrestler or whatever. Now it's just this MMA guy versus this MMA guy or this mixed martial artist versus this mixed martial artist, because their martial arts level and the test at hand is the culmination of all the martial arts that they've learned and to whether or not they're going to be dominant in the ring at this point in time against such an opponent. Bruce Lee knew that way going back, and his teachings and his philosophy was essentially the culmination of all that is good and usable from each art. And that's what you have now in the UFC, is that very existence. In order to become successful in a mixed martial arts arena, you have to find what is best from you and study all the martial arts, taking the pieces that you can use in order to become an effective martial artist yourself. So that philosophy has come to fruition. Bruce Lee at that time would have been light years ahead of anybody, because they were all focused on being great at their one idea or one martial art and holding themselves to that one concept. One more thing I just want to bring up too, and you talk about the reality of it. Well, there's another thing that's also very popular nowadays, which is the bizarre world of fake martial arts. That is a very, very real thing. And if you look on different things, you'll see people that are moving people around. But martial arts used to be a cult. For most of it was very, very cult. Like you go in and your master, and this is what he does, and you listen, you don't question, and this and that. And if they start moving you and doing things like that, and they could do all these weird type of things, and you kind of go with the flow, and this has to be the most effective thing in the world, and all their claims to fighting had to be true. There's a big thing now going out and looking at these so-called martial arts masters or whatever with their kind of students that are almost programmed just like a cult into some of their belief systems. And what's terrible is that they're being taken advantage of because they're paying their hard-earned money, and their parents are dropping their kids off to these people, and God knows what they're learning. I mean, it's pretty scary. So Bruce Lee was certainly not a part of that. His was something that was very practical,
All right, so, and actually, I've seen a lot of that stuff where, like, whatever. I watched Joe Rogan and how they just, like, laugh at a lot of these videos where you get the dude with, like, he could, like punch your stomach with a 2-inch finger, blah, 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 whatever. But it's almost like the students, like, believe it, so they believe that it'll hurt them. But anyway, it's BS. But anyway, but yeah, so I think that's really good. But now I wanted to just end off our thing with this. Once again, I'm gonna do a little bit of devil's advocate here, which is that I do think that there are people that they do get into mixed martial arts, or they do get into self-defense, or they do get into, I mean, if you want to go even higher than that, like whatever, getting, guns and different arms, whatever stuff to self-defense. In other words, where it's like they actually do it, where they are kind of they're not the people that should be practicing these things. In other words, they will abuse their abilities. They will. They're the people that they will hurt someone unnecessarily. Unfortunately, maybe that's part of some of the scenario why it's like, people are like, oh, this person was, he was trained in this and trained in that, and that's why he killed this person or he did this and that. And I'm like, that's not a true representation.
It's nothing to worry about. Like in life, there's a bad apple in any situation. It's just, that's like life. To me, it's all spiritual. So then just like when you go out when you go to your job, there's gonna be individuals that don't have the same working ethic as the other workers, or people that are slackers, and I mean that's like in anything, you know what I mean? But like anything that's not within moderation, usually people always worry about, oh, this thing is what killed them, or this drug, or this thing. But technically, anything that's not within any certain amount of balance or moderation, pretty much anything will hurt you. You take an aspirin and Excedrin shouldn't hurt you. But if you take 30 or 40 of them every day, damn right, then ask the question. Probably, without a doubt.
I kind of equate it to this, Kirk. It's kind of like you're talking about somebody misusing the tool.
Right.
It's kind of like you have a person that wants to learn how to use a gun.
Right.
And something goes wrong. Was it the gun? Was it the gun's fault?
Right.
Or was it the person who pulled the trigger? Was it that person who chose to pull that trigger on someone he shouldn't have, or use it in a way that it shouldn't have been used, on a target that it shouldn't have been shooting at? It's always the person. So anybody could use any tool and misuse that tool. Usually the person that takes that gun and is looking to use it isn't trying to find another person with a gun to use it on. No, because that person might shoot back. So usually they're trying to use a tool to take advantage of another person. So is there that person that will use martial arts in its devastating, dangerous way, in an abusive way, in a way that is a bullying way, to get one over on people that now he can dominate because he knows a trick or two? Yes.
Right.
But ultimately, if that person wants to really move forward in that art, he has to be, it's iron that sharpens iron. It's steel that sharpens steel.
Exactly.
It's the same people of the same category. He is not really a martial artist. He's only somebody that can go so far and only really target people that aren't. Because any martial artist that really wants to go and learn about martial arts has to learn from people that really know what they're doing. And those people, you can't pull out a gun of your own because they have their own, and it's probably bigger and badder and with more experience.
But like anything, like a cop. I mean,
Fair enough.
not every cop. There's cops out there that only get a badge because it's pure ego. Then there's cops out there that are there to serve and protect. So it depends. Like, I mean, like anything. Like there's always people out there misusing their powers and abusing it. That's like someone that could be someone on steroids. Sometimes you could be like, well, I mean, depending on how they're like, if a person's using steroids, do we just say, oh, they're abusing steroids? If you're abusing steroids, you can get hurt. But if you're going to the doctors or something, he's prescribing you a steroid for certain things. It can also be used to help your body and be very medicinal. You know what I mean? So it depends. But if you're just sitting there doing cycles, whatever, then that's called abusing steroids. That's why steroids has a bad name, because you don't hear about the people that abuse it, and then it's like, but doctors are, steroids was made to help you, you know what I mean, in certain ways. So it's not like, I mean, it's like anything, how you want to look at it.
Right.
And Excedrin will get rid of your headache, but you take 30 of them, like Cat Williams said, it'll probably be your last headache.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's like anything, the moderation. Now, before I end this, before I got to go, but I want to say one thing to finish the story of Bruce Lee before we get off. If Bruce Lee were alive today, though, Bruce Lee would still be a nasty fighter, because he would take all the techniques and martial arts today and do the same thing he did then. Oh, would he be that good today? Well, that's like he's the one that paved the way for everybody today. So it'd be like, well, who's better, Michael Jordan or Dr. J? But technically, no Dr. Dre, you wouldn't even have Michael Jordan. And just like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, without Michael Jordan, you wouldn't have a Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. So it's just whatever, looking at it from today's time in comparison. If Bruce Lee was alive in this day and age now, he would still be the same fighter he was back then, and he'd be nasty.
He'd be far better. He'd be an ill grappler. He would have learned that. His whole thing was about reality and realism. Doesn't get any more real than MMA.
Now
So he
has
would
a grappler.
absolutely learning that as well. Sure.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, some of the things Bruce Lee was, he was superhuman. Period. His speed, his power for his pound for pound, he was superhuman. I don't give a crap how you look at it. When you watch him train the things he did, it was unreal. He was superhuman, pound for pound. So that was real. You're not watching. That wasn't real fake. When he punches something, you'll know, or he's for real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people, man, that's there was something that really happened when Royce Gracie came into the UFC. There was a realization of true martial arts that in my opinion, maybe it never had happened before. You know, Royce Gracie, you know, his brother Rickson is far better and far more dominant. And he used to talk about his going to his brothers, and he'd tap him 100 times, you know. But there was a reason why, you know, that I think that if Rickson had done it, it wouldn't have had the same impact. Because Rickson was a bigger guy, you know. He was like 180,
Right.
185,
Right.
shape, jack. So for him to go up and beat up people and, you know, choke them out or whatever, you say, but there must be some physical
Right.
aspect or
Right.
whatever. But it's another thing when your skinny, tall, gangly brother with
Right.
like no muscle tone or anything is choking out 300-pound giants.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? One after another. The impact of the humble man is so impacted. It's so much greater because he was a weak, you know, like what looked to be more a weaker
Hey, guys.
person.
I'm gonna head out. So I just want to say I'll see you guys later.
All right, buddy.
The part 2. All right, cool.
Catch you
All
later.
right, guys.
Okay.
But that when that happened, that was such a big deal. You know, the impact. I think it has had the most lasting
Totally.
impact.
Absolutely.
To dive into and find out what the truth is, and the way you find out is the truth is by putting all our beliefs into an arena and finding out who's going to come out on top. And by the third UFC, when Royce had won them all, and you know, it became a whole different revolution of knowledge had been kickstarted that has not stopped. But in actuality, that was what Bruce Lee envisioned way back then. It's just that he lived in a time before that evolution took place,
Right.
in a cage. So, you know, he had gone as far as he can go. But just like anything in any sport, you know, when you talk about the reality is, you know, Kirk, if you put any football player up against now from football players of the past, or offensive line up from an offensive line from the past, a defensive line of the past, we're just bigger, better, and stronger because we learned what they did in the past.
Right.
So we can
Right.
expand on what they've learned. And
Yeah.
humanity has always expanded on what they've learned. Look at civilization. The Industrial Revolution was a giant thing. We laugh at that now, you know what I mean? Compared to the, technological advances that we have today, the Industrial Revolution is very, very minimal. You know, the bytes of computer. As we go on, we
I'll
always
check you guys.
figure
I gotta head
out
out.
how to become better.
All right.
You know?
Later, Heath. Later, Eric.
Right.
Later, dude.
All right, man.
So that's ultimately it. That's why it's hard to put one error and say, what can this guy do in this error? Well, if he was access to the same way that we were able to be instructed, who knows?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Hey, look, by the way, once again, I said I'm kind of playing devil's advocate there. There was a, this is going back, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. I was hanging out with some guys, and this was like, you know, back when like GSP was like on top. So we're talking like almost 10 years ago or something. So, we all went over to their house, and it was me and the wife. And GSP was doing, you know, whatever. He was clearly, you know, the title match. But there were all these other fights. And it cracked me up, man. And once again, I don't want to make fun of people. But they were like, dude, man, I'll tell you right now. If those guys went up against a real hard boxer, like, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, whatever and stuff, you know, he'd knock them out with the good old American punch. And I'm like, dude, he would never get a chance to get the good old American punch.
You know what the worst thing you can do in any fight, Kirk, that will almost guarantee and secure your loss? is to actually believe that you know about something that you totally do not know about,
Right.
but you believe you do.
Right.
Now you're going to get hurt. Now
Terrible.
that's when you get hurt.
Yep. And
That's
it's
when
going
you
to be
didn't
quick.
see the kick coming, that you didn't see the shoot. You didn't know the opponent was trying to break your arm. You knew
Right.
you grabbed it, but you didn't know why. And then before you knew what happened, it's
Right.
over.
Right. And it actually,
It's over now.
it's over now. And I hate to say it, but it doesn't even last long. It'll happen like in 30 seconds, man. You know?
Most fights in the street, if you're talking in the street, most of them aren't very long.
Right.
Because people are trying to inflict maximum damage because, first of all, when you don't have rules, your survival instinct kicks in
Right.
3 times as much. So you're not thinking about doing things any super sassy way, and the concrete and everything around you becomes a weapon as well
Yep.
of destruction.
Yep.
And holding someone to it and whatnot is a very, very scary thing. So,
Yeah, man.
no, it's very true, man.
Yep.
But listen, this is great. We'll have to do a part 2 on this, bro.
Yeah. You know what? We will continue this. Good talking to you, buddy. And the whole point of this whole thing is that, look, either way, we need to, constantly try to figure out how we can, be putting ourselves in a more positive, frame of mind and to continue to be positive. Anyway, so I guess that's it, man. So I will talk to you later, buddy.
We'll do, pal.
Thanks for watching. Give us a like. We'll be replying to your comments in our next episodes. We post almost daily, so subscribe to keep up with the latest.